Hello, everyone. Welcome to Growing Citrus. I'm Ann Shellman, the Master Gardener Coordinator for the University of California Cooperative Extension, Stanislaus County Master Gardeners. This is just a notice to let you know we are recording this for educational and promotional use, and then it's going to be on our YouTube channel later. And so because it's a webinar, you cannot communicate with us vocally, but you can text us through the chat. You can type in your questions and answers in the Q&A box, and you can just go ahead and read the rest of those instructions, and then we will move on. Okay, so now's a chance for you to use the chat. So tell us about you. How many years have you been gardening? Let's take a look here. The chat box is located at the part of your screen where you can see all the controls. So mute, stop video, participants, chat. It looks like Debbie has been gardening about 30 years. Excellent. And I know we've got about 12 people joining us so far, so that's great. All right, we'll give you a moment to find the chat and text into it. Sandy, since she was a child. Stephanie's been gardening for 50 years plus. Great. And Sori says 20 plus years. So this class today is about growing citrus in your garden. This was a tree that was growing in my backyard. I say was, because it was a pomelo, and even though it was a beautiful tree, it had over 200 fruits on it that were anywhere from 2 to 3 pounds, and I can eat about 1 pomelo a year. I got a little tired of loading them up into wagons and taking them to work or putting them out in the front, and I decided I wanted to do a low water use garden with California natives, but I still feel sad every time I see this photo. But yeah, citrus is a great crop for California. So for those of you watching that do not already have a copy, anytime you watch one of our videos, you can visit our website and download a copy of the presentation slides and then print them and you can follow along. A little bit about us. The Master Gardeners are a statewide program. We are all throughout the state of California. And we extend research-based knowledge and information on home horticulture, pest management, and sustainable landscape practices. We do that in person, on the phone, through email. You can stay in touch with us by being a part of the Stanislaus Sprout, which everybody should be receiving, at least the folks on the call. But if you're watching later, feel free to enter this email address or this web address in and sign up for the Sprout. You can see right here, subscribe, and then you can type your address into the box. We also hope you will subscribe to our YouTube channel, which has all of the videos that we have been doing for the past 2 years. So if you at any time need help, you can always contact your local program, and we'll send an email out to everybody on this call to tell you who your local program is. We have a lot of people joining from Stanislaus County, but there are people from all over the state as well. And Master Gardeners are here to help identify pests, to help you make less toxic choices and solutions. And then we also have the UCIPM website, which you can Google for all kinds of great information. So tonight we are going to talk about citrus, and we're going to cover planting, watering, fertilizing, pruning, some common problems, and then some solutions from IPM. And at the very end, we will answer all of your questions. But for now, let's have some fun. Let's take a poll. I am launching this poll right now. And our first question is, do you have citrus trees in your landscape? And then which tree do you have at least one of? And then the list has a couple different choices that I'll put on the screen in just a moment. And then we want to find out, what are you interested in learning about? So I don't see, okay, good. It must be working. I see a few people are putting their answers in. So for question 2, these are the different types of species of citrus that we are asking you about. So we want to find out what's in your backyard, your front yard. I wish my orange tree was in my backyard, because this year someone came and harvested all the fruit when it was not ripe. Because just because an orange is orange does not mean it's ripe. You have to keep testing them. And I had tried them and they were still very sour. And I guess whoever got them maybe had to put some sugar on them. I'm not sure. So now we're going to end our poll and share the results. It looks like every single person who answered this poll has a citrus tree. Looks like everybody has a lemon. And then we've got a couple people with oranges. 3/4 of our folks here have limes, and just 10% have grapefruit. 40% have mandarins, 13% have tangelos, 63% have kumquats, and then some have other. And then people are most interested tonight to learn about when and how to prune. And I'm excited that you are, because that is the easiest part of this presentation. If you are only here tonight, I think these tips will be really great for you. You're only here to hear that. 75% want to know best watering practices, 60% when and how to fertilize, 40% how pest management, and nobody needs harvesting tips. So I guess you all know how to try your citrus out to make sure that they're right. All right, so let's get started. Now, this is a common thing that people do. They think that they can grow a citrus tree from a seed, and you could grow a citrus tree, but you're not going to get the same fruit that you ate. And this is because citrus plants don't usually come true. So essentially, citrus trees are vegetatively propagated from cutting. So what does that mean? It means that there are 2 trees in one right here. We've got the bottom, which is the root stock, which is grown for disease resistance, vigorous growth. And then the top part is the scion, or the part that has the fruit that you want. Now, recently in a Master Gardener class, somebody with an orange tree brought in a lemon that was like this big. And they were like, what is this? Why is this on the bottom of my tree? And it's because the bottom root stock was grafted with a cultivar that has really great vigorous growth and puts out, you know, a lot of fruit. But unfortunately, the fruit that it puts out does not taste very good at all. So that's the reason why we combine these. So if you wanted to grow your own citrus tree from seed, it would probably take 6 or 8 years to get your tree up to a good size. Then you would want to graft onto the top and hopefully get the cultivar that you desire. And then hopefully the whole thing works out. So this is why most of us prefer to go to a nursery or garden center to get our citrus. And a good thing to note is that anything growing below this point is a sucker that should be removed. And that was the case with the person who brought in the really, really crazy large piece of fruit. So it's springtime. It's a great time to plant a citrus tree. You want to choose healthy looking trees that have well-formed limbs. And you want to look in the top of the container and the bottom, and make sure that there aren't any roots that are circling, because that means that for whatever reason, that citrus has been sitting in the pot for a while. These days, nurseries and garden centers are doing so much stocking and restocking that you probably are getting a pretty new tree. So as far as your planting location, you want to avoid windy areas. Your first choice is a south-facing exposure, and your second choice is west-facing. And the reason is because we all have microclimates in our yard. So we all may live in the same town with the same weather, but certain areas of our yard may be cooler or warmer than others. And always give your tree enough room to grow. And if you have a nice neighbor and you want to share, you know, make sure they know, and then you can grow the limbs over onto their side. So planting citrus, it's really important to plant correctly. Not long ago, actually several times recently, we have had people send us pictures of their citrus tree And what we can tell, these trees may be 10 or 15 years old, but they're failing. And the reason they're failing is because they were planted too deeply. So you want to make sure that you dig your hole twice as wide as the container and the same depth. Remove it carefully from the pot. And then it needs to be even with the same grade of the soil. You don't want to put soil or anything over the top of that root ball. Later on, a little bit of mulch is okay, but you don't want that root ball to sink down and be below the level of the soil. You want it to be even. And if you bury the crown, what can happen is water gets in there and disease can enter, and there are just a lot of things that can happen that can cause this root rot. So planting your tree correctly is the first step to making sure you're successful. A lot of folks want to know if they can plant citrus in containers. According to a wholesale citrus nursery that I contacted recently, they sell a lot of citrus, that any citrus can grow in a container, ideally 10 to 15 gallons. It doesn't have to be a dwarf tree. Apparently any size will do. You just really want to make sure that it has holes for adequate drainage and that you use high quality potting soil. And with any potted plant, you don't want to use garden soil for many reasons. Using garden soil can introduce weeds, pathogens, insects. It also is really heavy and it tends to settle, and then it can get heavier and heavier. So you'll want to use a high grade quality potting soil. All right, at this time, we'll take any questions. I happened to be looking for photos for this presentation and I came across this picture and I fell in love with this cat. His name's Mr. Bingley, and apparently he likes to knock the lemons down from Amy's tree and chew on them. He likes anything lemon. So I thought that was fun. All right, unfortunately, it looks like some people didn't have a good use with the poll. Sorry about that. Someone said they love the Stanislaus sprout. All right. All right, I don't see any questions. So I think we're ready to move on, Tim. And you know what? We didn't introduce ourselves. I introduced myself, but now let me turn it over to you, Tim, Master Gardener. Go right ahead.
Hi, my name's Tim Long. I'm a 2020 Master Gardener class graduate. I've been gardening pretty much all my life. Was an ag major, was in FFA, so forth. So I've been around agriculture for a long time, although that wasn't my primary responsibility or career until I retired. And now I'm about a full-time gardener, except when I'm doing Master Gardener things, which is still gardening. So we want to get into the subject of watering your young trees. Whichever method you choose, you can see the choices that we've listed there. Basin flooding is the first one, and it uses about a 3-foot diameter around the newly planted tree. And during the first year, you should water enough to soak to the bottom of the root ball, and eventually as the tree ages, water should soak to the 2 to 3 foot depth. Of course, that depends on your soil type, which will range from sandy to clay, and that impacts the amount of water or the length of time that you should water. Micro sprinklers and sprinklers should be placed so that the root ball gets wet during the first year, especially as new roots develop. It will take probably 2 to 3 years for them to spread out to what we would consider a normal for the age or for that size of a tree. The one thing you want to keep in mind with using sprinklers is not to place them so that they're spraying on the trunk of the tree, which will give you even more problems than you care to think about. Drip irrigation is obviously much slower application, but the same principles of getting water to the complete root ball area applies. You can circle up your drip emitters on a line closer into the root ball, and just it uses more efficient water use because there's less evaporation since it drips and is slow. Water, you should be watering when the top few inches of the soil are dry, but deeper may still feel moist. Now you'll learn with experience what that looks like. Most likely, after a few years, you will just know when you look at it that it's time. You can stick your finger down in it if your soil is loose enough, or you could use a moisture meter. I have a home moisture meter that'll allow me to test down to about 8 inches. Okay, then moving on to mature trees. You should water under the drip line for this. The root system will grow out sideways, and it will go out at least to the distance that the crown or the canopy of the leaves structure of the tree has grown. These are your primary nutrient and water using roots that will provide nourishment for your tree. So you should water again to a depth here of about 12 to 18 inches. Roots typically grow outward and within about 3 feet of the surface. We sometimes think that they will, grow tap roots 20 feet deep, but we've learned is not the case. Irrigation timing, how often should you water? Well, with citrus and depending on the soil and the weather conditions, watering could be required every week or maybe only every 6 weeks. If you have a clay soil that holds the moisture and you have good mulch over your watering area, it may not require watering quite as often. If it's very, very hot or you have sandy soil, you may have to certainly water on a more regular basis. But you still, in all cases, should not water close to the main trunk of mature trees. Again, that some problems that we'll get into later with root crown issues and so forth. So are there any questions about watering at this point? I'm not seeing anything pop up. So we'll move on to fertilization. Trees should be fertilized lightly during the first year. Use a fertilizer containing nitrogen, which is one of the primary nutrients that's required by citrus. A high concentration of phosphorus and potassium isn't really needed as desperately as in other plantings. During the first year, you should give trees about a tablespoon of chemical fertilizer, such as ammonium sulfate, which has basically 21% nitrogen, and on a monthly basis during the spring and summer. Nitrogen fertilizer should not be applied, however, after late summer, since this stimulates new growth and makes trees more susceptible to frost damage. My recommendation for a fertilizer would be at your local nursery or big box store, wherever you do your shopping. Pick one that specifically says it's designed for citrus and follow their instructions as far as application and timing. Deficiencies in citrus. The most common deficiency found in Stanislaus County citrus is nitrogen. That's the stuff that makes it green. Iron is not a common problem in our area, but often environmental disorders are mistaken for deficiency symptoms, and we'll talk about those a little bit later in the presentation. Use of an all-purpose citrus fertilizer from a nursery or garden center will alleviate a lot of the problems, as they do provide not only nitrogen, but the other trace elements that citrus helps citrus be healthy for you. Okay, pruning. Timing is important. Citrus doesn't require a lot of pruning, but if you're going to do it for whatever the reason, you should do that as the spring growth begins, and avoid pruning at other times. Most citrus trees don't require pruning unless it's some damage has occurred or just for general shaping and looks. If you prune too heavily, you can definitely affect your crop production. My next door neighbor has a tangelo, large older tangelo, and a large navel tree. And 2 years ago, they thought they were getting too big. So they had their gardener come in and really whack the top and all the way around. And they looked beautiful when they were finished. They were nice and round. But the next year, they couldn't figure out why they didn't get much fruit. And the reason was they pruned a little too heavy. Now, there is such a thing as alternate bearing, which we'll talk about as well, which could have had some impact, but be careful with pruning. You should prune injured trees, whether it's injury from mechanical damage or frost damage, which we don't get a lot of in our area, thank goodness. Suckers may sprout after damage and may even out-compete with the top of the tree. The one thing that Ann mentioned was if you see suckers growing below the bud union, take those babies off, because they're not going to give you good fruit and they're just going to suck a lot of energy out of the tree. As far as care of pruning wounds, comment here is trees aren't human. We don't need to medicate them and wrap them. We have learned over the years that it's better to let them heal themselves, which they will do. Benefits of mulching, besides weed reduction, water conservation, and soil physical property improvement. Those are really important issues. Obviously, if you can take the tree over its age, it's going to lose a lot of its own leaves, which would provide some mulching. But if you can amend that with other items as well, it is very helpful to maintain a better balance of your moisture content and be able to use less water. And soil physical property improvement, meaning that as these mulch breaks down, it provides additional nutrients that you would get from a commercial fertilizer, but it comes from natural sources and virtually didn't cost you anything. Especially with green matter and in the mulch, improves the nitrogen fertility. It helps control root disease, and it helps you get rid of or use up your yard waste as citrus mulch. I wouldn't think that you would want to put, like if you have a Bermuda grass lawn, I wouldn't put those clippings on it. It also helps with soil temperature improvement. Is obviously here in the valley, our temperatures get very high, which is good for citrus. It does enjoy that and needs it for better production. Okay. The disadvantages. If frost is expected, you should pull the mulch back from beneath the trees. And this is because the heat rises, obviously. And if you were to run water, if you're expecting a hard freeze, that also helps increase the temperature because it holds, moist soil holds more heat than a dry soil. As irrigation water in the soil cools and freezes, heat is released. And that's obviously not much of a problem in our area. I don't know of any time that I've ever heard about our soil freezing. Now, if you lived in the northern climates or in the foothills, that could be a problem. Leave bare space for pollinators to come in as well. Next slide.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell them about your little friends here that you took a picture of.
Oh, those are
actually wasps. I think I wrote that wrong.
Yeah, they're ground nesting wasps. They like a sandy soil, and what I have raised beds in my backyard for my vegetable gardens, and I have a sand walkway in between them. And one day I went out and found all these little critters burrowing into the sand. And as I investigated, I found that that's what they do. And unfortunately, they are a type of wasp, as Ann said. They're friendly to people. I walk through them all the time during the summer season when they're present. And I've never had one even try to land on me or sting in any way. And they are beneficial because they are a pollinator to a certain extent, and they eat other insects as well. So they're a helpful little critter. Harvest and storage. You know, the biggest mistake you can make is not letting the fruit ripen on the tree, because unlike a tomato, you can't pick an orange and let it sit on the counter and it will continue to ripen. It just doesn't happen. It does not continue with its sugar production. And so the best thing to do is just watch the color and taste one once in a while and see how they're doing. There's nothing worse than picking this beautiful orange and biting, open and biting into it, and it's sour as can be. And don't pick them until they're fully ripe, which means if you have an older tree, you may be picking a lot of oranges all at once. I personally don't have citrus trees in my yard because one neighbor on one side has well, it's a Tangelo and a navel orange, and the one on the other side of me has lots of Meyer lemons and tangerines. So I'm pretty well provided all during the season. Be careful when you're harvesting the fruit, because if you just try to pull it off, you can actually pull the skin off with the stem, which leaves it open then for infestation and bad things to happen to it. When normal harvesting in commercial groves, they use a hand pruner, and they're very careful, and they prune it close to the fruit so that they don't scar up other fruit as they put them in their bins. You can twist it, hold the stem and then twist the fruit, and generally that works, but I would suggest using a pruner. The best storage space is on the tree. Once it's harvested, it can last in the fridge for 2 to 6 weeks. Like I said, they will not continue getting sweeter, so eat them up or squeeze them for juice. Plant health. I've lost my spot in my, here we go. I had to find my notes, sorry. Plants that aren't watered well are more susceptible to pests. That it weakens their whole system, and that's when you will find that pests like to attack when they find weak plants. Most diseases and pests are opportunistic, and that's exactly what they look for, is a weakened plant. And poor watering is one of the main culprits for attracting bad things into your garden area. I think that was meant for master gardeners there.
Yeah, we might have left a few.
Oopsies.
All right, any questions? I didn't see any in the chat or the Q&A. It's a quiet group tonight. Sounded like some people are probably watching while they're busy with other things. All right, so now we're going to talk about some pest problems. And so it's important to understand the life cycles of pests. And a lot of the pests that we're going to talk about have something called a pest notes or a quick tip that has lots of great information on that pest and its life cycle and how to manage it. So one of the interesting things that happens on citrus is that ants will tend certain types of critters like mealybugs, whiteflies, psyllids, and scales. And they call it tending because the little pest is like a cow and the ant is like a farmer. And the ants go around and protect these little pests because there are beneficial insects like lady beetles, lacewings, and parasitic wasps that land and try to kill or parasitize and eat these pests, but the ants will kill them instead. So a lot of times if you have a pest problem in your tree, you can, instead of trying to get rid of this pest the secondary pest, the ant, is the one you can get rid of. In our area, we have a lot of Argentine ants, which are a big pest. Once you can get rid of these ants, then the natural enemies have a chance to control the pests naturally. And you can use something called tanglefoot or a bait station to help control the ants. And we have these really great bits of information called quick tips that you can use. You can download them, and we'll send you a link to that so that you have that information. And this is kind of cool. This is a natural enemy, a parasitic wasp, attacking a mealybug that is not protected by ants. So look at all these pests that ended up dying off because of a parasitic insect. You know what, Tim? I think I might have put the wrong presentation up. What do you think? Or is this right? No, maybe we're still okay.
No, that's right.
I'm talking too soon. Okay, we're going to attempt to play this video. So let's do this. I want to share with sound. All right, and then tell me if you can all hear this. I will also put on the captions.
Do you see trails of ants marching up and down your landscape trees and shrubs?
Give us a thumbs up if you can hear it.
Ants may be attracted to flower nectar or ripe fruit, they are not eating your plants. Ants in trees are most likely gathering a sticky substance called honeydew. Honeydew is produced by insects such as aphids, psyllids, mealybugs, whiteflies, or soft scales. Worker ants take this honeydew back to their nest to feed the colony. To secure their honeydew food source, ants tend these insects and protect them from natural enemies. Natural enemies are predators and parasites such as lady beetles, parasitic wasps, or other insects and spiders. Natural enemies eat or parasitize plant pests, which can help reduce infestations. Watch as this tiny parasitic wasp is about to parasitize a scale insect. Before it can do so, however, an ant discovers the wasp and quickly kills it. Keeping ants out of plants allows natural enemies to do their job. To keep ants out of trees and shrubs, use a sticky barrier such as tanglefoot. To do this, wrap the trunk with a collar of heavy paper, masking tape, or other tree wrap material. Ensure the tree wrap does not have any gaps, or the ants may go under it instead of walking across it. Next, apply tanglefoot over the tree wrap using a disposable plastic knife or flat wooden stick. A thin layer is sufficient. If the coating is too thick, it may drip and get on the tree. Check the barrier every week or two and spread it with a stick to prevent the material from getting clogged with debris and dead ants. Otherwise, ants will be able to get across. Trim branches away from structures and other plants to reduce pathways for ants to travel up to your trees and shrubs. For more information about managing honeydew-producing insects, see the UC IPM website.
All right, great. So here is another pest that tends to like citrus. They're called scales. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes and colors. You can see this is a black scale. Here is the female and the rest of the little nymphs. Those are her babies. The male is actually a flying insect, and so you won't see it in the tree. Cottony cushion scale. This one, if you have a lot of them, you can really tell what they are. It looks like somebody took a cake decorating tip and put these little white frosting bits in here. And then here are some brown scale. So some of these, when they first start out, you might not even know they are there, but you'll see this sticky honeydew. And then this black powdery substance called sooty mold will grow on the honeydew. And then this whole situation is attracting ants. Here are some hard scales. These are also difficult to spot. This symptom here is one of the signs that something is going wrong. Unfortunately, a lot of problems are signs of various things that could be wrong. So when people ask a question about like, what's wrong with my tree? The answer is always, it depends. So we would have to do some investigation to find out what's going on. And maybe if you looked close enough, you could see the scale. It's really easy to spot them if it's a bad infestation on the fruit. This one's called California scale, and this one is called San Jose scale. And the tricky thing is these hard scales do not produce sticky honeydew or sooty mold. So solutions for dealing with scale would be using something like a horticultural oil. And if you're going to do that, you have to time it during the crawler stage in late winter to early summer. So anytime you're dealing with an insect pest, it's really important to understand the life cycle if you are going to apply some sort of a pesticide. And then you can read more about these pests here. All right, Tim, over to you.
Next one we're going to talk about are citrus leaf miners. The indication that you may have some, you begin to notice that new leaves are curled and distorted, and there's these shiny little tunnels in the leaves, as shown down in the lower left corner. The adult moth lays these eggs in the springtime, and the larvae actually are what creates these lines or these tunnels. Well, I'm using my pointer to no avail. Yeah. What they do is just tunnel just underneath the outer layer of the leaf, and that's what causes the leaf to curl. So they're taking nutrients and feeding themselves, and eventually they will hatch out and ultimately become another moth, and there you go. The cycle continues. Okay. Solutions. Mature trees really don't require any treatment. Trees younger than 4 years old may be stunted, but unlikely to be killed. It's not something that will completely devastate the trees. You don't need to prune off the damaged leaf areas. It's usually, it wouldn't impact the entire tree. It would probably be limited to just a few areas. Don't fertilize during the summer or the fall, and that will help alleviate the problem somewhat. And then, like Ann said, read the pest notes about the citrus leaf miner. I can put a copy of that in the chat, I suppose. The next, thrips. Thrips have a similar appearance as far as leaves curling and distorted and stunted growth. There's scarring on the fruit, as you can see on top of that. It's kind of a scale-like, or actually varnish-like specks of frass, which is basically bug poop. And a thrip is a very, very tiny insect. You're not going to see it probably with your naked eye. It would require some magnification. One way to test for it would be to tap the leaves over a piece of white paper to spot them. And by the time you notice the curling on the leaves and the damage or scarring looking area on your fruit, they may be gone. So you could run the test and see, but it may not be a problem by that point. Solution: the damage is unlikely to kill a plant again. And you can check for more information on their life expectancy and so forth on the UC IPM pest notes for thrips or the thrips quick tips card. Okay, the next item is whiteflies, and these babies show up every year and on all kinds of vegetables and plants besides just citrus. Eventually the leaves will, indications are the leaves will yellow and dry and fall off, and there will be the sticky substance left on them that ants on the leaves and the branches because they like the sticky substance. Whiteflies flutter around when the branches and leaves are touched, and they're just irritating little nuisances. Solutions. One thing that's nice about them is they're easy to wash off with water or drown them. I have this issue, it seems like every year in my vegetable garden, and a quick hosing down will get them out of the way. Horticultural oil can smother the pest, things like neem oil or various horticultural soaps. And again, if you go to the UCIPM site, look up the pest notes on whiteflies to get more information on their life cycle and other things you might try to do. Okay, snails and slugs. Normally what you're going to find is chewing damage on the edges of the leaves, probably some slime, tattered looking leaves, slime trails all over up the stems and out on the leaves or on the fruit itself. As you can see in the bottom picture where they've actually chewed through the rind or the skin on that, I'm assuming is an orange. They will attack oranges, lemons, tangelos, you name it. They're pesky little things. As far as solutions for them, I have successfully used some store-bought applications of slug or snail bait. You can use various types of traps. Snails are easy to spot and well, at least in the evening, or go out with a flashlight and you can find them and just pick them off and get rid of them. There are iron phosphate baits. Some people will put like a pie tin down with a little bit of salty water, and they will go for the water and then fizzle away. That's sort of a home remedy thing. My suggestion would be to go to the UCIPM quick tips and steady up on them if you have a serious issue.
And Tim, believe it or not, there is advice in either the quick tips or the pest note to drown them with beer. So
Beer.
yeah, the yeast attracts them, and then you dig the pie tin or yogurt cup or like a tuna can just down to the surface of the soil so that they're crawling along and then they fall in and drown.
They just can't handle the drink.
Nope.
Okay, any questions?
I haven't seen any questions. All right. So at this time, we want to talk about a new invasive pest that's really important to know about, especially if you love citrus as much as most of us here in California do. The pest is new. It's been in the US since about the well, at least in California since the 1990s. And it's called the Asian citrus psyllid. And it is a really, really small insect. A couple of years ago, I was down in LA where they do have this pest. And I had heard that it looked like an aphid. But when I saw it, I disagreed with that. I thought it was much, much smaller and really difficult to see. And so when it was first reported on the news, they were calling it the deadly, ACP HLB disease. And people were worried because the word deadly made it seem like, can I eat the fruit, or is something dangerous going on? But it's just deadly to the tree and definitely to the citrus nursery. And this psyllid carries a bacterium. And so just like whiteflies and mealybugs and other sucking pests, this pest is sucking the juices out of the plant and creating this sticky honeydew. And many of these types of pests do carry disease. So they are carrying this disease. The insect has been found, which is why you may see yellow sticky traps in your trees. So if you've ever had someone knock on your door from the ag commissioner's office, it's always nice to allow them to put those sticky traps in your trees because they're monitoring for pests. And most times pests that are problematic to agriculture show up in home orchards and home vineyards. And so your citrus tree is a possibility for that. Fortunately, the actual disease, which causes yellowing of leaves and greening of fruit, is not found in the Central Valley. But please keep an eye out for it. And if you ever think you might have found the insect, you can contact your local ag commissioner's office. So remember, just because you see leaves that are yellowing or fruit that's green, that does not necessarily indicate the problem. You would have to spot this insect pest. And you can learn more about it on this page. here, and our pest notes has lots of great information. And you can see it's a very, very small insect, and this is its waste material, but it's magnified many times. All right, any questions about the Asian citrus psyllid or the disease associated with it? This is a quiet group. Okay, Tim, back to you.
No,
Or was this me?
This is you.
Just kidding, and I will continue. So early on in the presentation, I mentioned that sometimes people will call and their citrus tree is not doing well. And when we look at the base of it, what we'll see actually is, you know, when children are little, if you can remember back to when you were a child, and you would draw a picture of a tree in a lawn or, you know, wherever you put it, and it would just be this straight stick and no roots, nothing. That was how these trees were planted. And so this tree here was planted up to past the crown. And then you can see that these roots that were buried got infections in them, and this killed the tree. So sometimes when people contact our office, it may be too late for their tree if it's starting to show some of these signs, and this root and crown rot is a problem. Now, the thing that's interesting is root and crown rots are always present in the soil. So it's not like this disease suddenly comes along and attacks this tree. The disease is always present in the soil. However, until a tree gets a wound or has some kind of a problem, the disease cannot enter. And so a healthy tree can avoid coming down with these problems in the first place. So we mentioned it was planted too deep. So it's really not recommended to plant a citrus tree in a lawn because even though you saw my tree at the beginning that was in a lawn, that was another reason why I removed it. It's better, and I always would water it with a hose to keep it going. Trees need that deep water that Tim was talking about earlier. So if you want to read more about this disease, you can here. So again, prevention is proper planning, managing the water. You may need to replace it, but it's fine. You can plant the same tree there. Just remember to keep it planted correctly, and then use mulch instead of building up your soil. All right. I see maybe one question. Oh, okay. It was a comment from GW. Many of my trees have micro sprinklers on them, which I will be changing. Great idea, especially, you know, micro sprinklers can work for irrigation, but not a good idea if they're hitting the base of a tree, for sure. All right, Tim, now it's over to you.
Okay, common problems caused by environmental disorders. And some of the things we're going to talk about are frost damage, fruit drop, fruit split, fruit lacking flavor, and alternate bearing. Okay, first area, next slide, yeah. Frost damage symptoms. Leaves or the twigs wither and turn dark brown to black, and the fruit is dry inside. Once I got out of the service back in the 70s, I worked at a citrus operation in Clovis, California. And we had a time of 3 days and nights where the temperature at night was running around 26 to 28 degrees, and the fog moved in the daytime, and the temperature never got above 32. So we had I was working for a ranch that had 2,000 acres of citrus, and we saw a lot of frost damage. And one of my jobs was to check the fruit to see if it was still usable, at least the Valencia oranges. We had Valencias and navels and lemons. Try to get them before they were totally destroyed by the frost and get them in for juicing. What happens is the little pockets or inside that hold the juice and there's a lot of sugar in there, it will freeze up, and then when it thaws, it just dries out. The juice obviously is gone from it, and you have nothing but pulp left, flavorless, useless pulp. So that's the solution is, well, first place, don't prune it right away if it's damage to the trees. Some of the damage that could take place, probably not in our area because we're fortunate that we don't get a lot of hard freezes. But if it does, the time period that I was talking about in my past, we actually had branches split. It was just terrible. Not just the fruit, but it impacted the trees, particularly the lemons, which are more susceptible to frost. If you prune it too early, you can just cause more problems. You should wait until springtime to prune out any damage to the tree itself. Young trees may require some protection if a frost is predicted. This last winter here, we had very, very mild winter with temperatures probably a dip below freezing, maybe a few nights, but it was still in around 30 degrees or so here in the city. It might have been colder in rural areas. Okay, you can back on the frost damage solutions. Obviously, from the picture, you can cover them if you're expecting a frost. You could put a light bulb inside there carefully if you don't want to get shocked. You could put a slow run of water. One of the things that we did in the commercial area was to run irrigation water when it got down that cold. Of course, we had wind machines and various heating things like smudge pots, which are no longer really allowed because of environmental impact. We actually had one section of lemons that we put out charcoal, small bags of charcoal, and had to go around and light those when the temperature dropped low enough. So next slide. Fruit and blossom drop. It's pretty much normal in most all citrus. An excessive fruit drop could be a problem. And it usually happens when trees are stressed by temperature, wind, or heavy pruning, lack of water, nutrients, over-fertilizing, and other issues. Citrus naturally adjusts the amount of fruit carried on the tree, so some fruit drop is normal. Excessive drop of older fruit may have several causes: lack of water or fertilizer, or heavy pruning, sudden changes in temperature, which happens here in the valley with the heat, although citrus loves heat for the most part, but especially sudden hot temperatures at fruit set or shortly thereafter, or insect infestations. Fruit splitting caused by tree stresses, primarily the changes in water application or the weather, like the sudden high temperatures I mentioned, or low humidity, which is pretty common here in the valley. Navel oranges often split during the fall, and the split usually starts at the navel end of the fruit, which is the weakest point of the rind. Valencia oranges may also split in some years, but studies indicate that changes in temperature and relative humidity are mainly responsible for fruit splitting. Damage to fruit can be reduced by maintaining adequate soil moisture. Again, think water. Okay. Bitter fruit. Fruit lacks sweet taste when picked too early. So it may not be a problem with the tree, it's just picked it too early. How do you determine the ripeness? Wait until that particular variety normally ripens. And there's a lot of literature out there that will tell you the general time frames that various citrus would be ripe, and then test it weekly if you're not sure. If it's bitter, it could be a seedling tree, one of those suckers that has grown up from below the bud union, may have matured to the point where it blooms and bears fruit. And I can guarantee you that there's about a 98, 99% chance that it will not be very sweet.
Yeah, one more thing to add to that, Tim, is that beware of where you buy trees. If it's not a nursery or garden center, and it might be something that somebody grew from a seed, and is selling you, and then the actual fruit itself is not going to be any good because it's not the one you're looking for.
Exactly. One of the main rootstocks that's used in citrus is called a sour grape. And there are various types which have different disease resistance. Okay, leaves turning brown and drying. Well, lack of water would be my first thought on what's happening, because citrus is not very drought tolerant, although it is a Mediterranean climate type of vegetation. It will not tolerate not having sufficient water. Water to soil type, need to be careful and watch your watering depending on your soil type. If it's a clay soil, it will take longer to penetrate, but it will probably stay moist longer because it will hold the moisture, especially if you've mulched. If it's sandy or silty, it will not hold the water as long as it percolates down through to lower regions. Watch the temperatures, especially that's going to impact water as well because of evaporation. The time of the year has something to do with it. And these are obviously evergreen trees, so they will lose leaves off and on all year long, but never totally unless there's a health issue. And then depending on your water methodology, dripping hose or flood basin or whatever you use, be careful that you're getting water in a sufficient amount that it gets the right depth for the tree. Alternate bearing. This is not an unusual thing for citrus at all. It tends to basically every other year produces a heavier crop than the previous years. We found that it's really more common in Valencia oranges and some of the mandarins. And the only apparent way to minimize this is to pick off some of the new fruit in heavy years and harvest ripe fruit as soon as it's ready, which will mean that the tree does not have to use as much energy to put into fruit production, and can utilize that energy the following year. Budding citrus trees. I experienced this again many years ago when in high school I worked at a commercial citrus nursery where we budded and sold soil balled trees to farmers locally. It's difficult to do. It takes some skill, and I wouldn't recommend that for just anybody to go try it. In the first place, you need to make sure that you have the right rootstock, as well as the top bearing budwood to produce the type of fruit that you want. As you can see, the types of cuts, basic buds are done with a T bud, where you cut a bud, as you can see in number A there. And then you slice a bud off of the, as shown on B, and it slides down into that cut that you've made. And then it gets wrapped with a plastic wrap for a certain amount of time, which would have to be checked periodically to make sure that it's healing up, which would usually be indicated by the bud beginning to show some growth. And then what happens is the wrapping comes off, and the top part of the rootstock above the bud then is taken off, and only allowing the new bud to grow into the full tree.
And Tim, this is a good spot to also mention, earlier we were talking about Asian citrus psyllid and Wong Wong Bing, which is this new invasive pest. And the way that it's transported is by people moving trees around, but also moving budwood around. So let's say you live here in Stanislaus County, but then you're down in Bakersfield or San Diego, and you see a citrus tree that you like, and you ask your friend, you know, hey, I want to take some of this citrus tree that you have. And so you cut those pieces and then you bring them across county lines. Sometimes people have brought them across state lines, country lines, and brought them in. And that's how we spread these pests. So it's really important to, if you're going to do budding and grafting, to do it with locally sourced material and to check it for pests.
Exactly. For most homeowners, my suggestion would be just go to the nursery and buy your tree. It's much safer. They have the right sources for providing you with something that's going to produce the way you want it to produce. Okay. Any questions?
Still a quiet group. Although thanks to Debbie Denoto, who was the one that mentioned buying only trees that are certified. So when you buy trees, they'll have a little label, I believe, that mentions that they are certified disease-free. All right, so that is the end of our presentation. It went pretty quick, didn't it, Tim?
Sure did.
So this slide is a picture of one of our Master Gardener's granddaughters. And it's just to remind you that you will receive an email from the Master Gardener program in 3 months with a survey. And it's going to ask you some questions about the class, essentially growing food and what you learned, and pest management topics. So please make sure to take that survey. So thank you so much. And let's see if we have any other questions. Oh, Bonnie wants to know, do I need to thin the fruit? I wonder if she's referring to the alternate bearing, Tim.
Most likely. I mean, and you'll know when you've got a heavy year, and it would be, obviously the fruit comes from the blossoms, and there's going to be a certain amount of blossom drop, but if not, you're going to have a lot of immature fruit, and it would be beneficial to thin that out to something that's more, you could more realistically use if they all survive. And that would also help with the following year, probably provide you a little bit more fruit than you might have because of the alternate, whatever you want to call that, stability of the tree.
All right. Oh, Debbie asked, the snail bait that you mentioned using, is it okay for edible plants? I think, you know, anytime we're talking about something like that, a product, it's best to read the label and see what it has to say. If it's labeled for use around edible plants, I'm assuming you're thinking like things that are close to the ground, maybe like lettuce, radishes that it might get on. Double check the label to make sure, because there's so many different products out there. And thank you, Sori said, always great information. Christine said, thank you. Stephanie said, any different treatment for plants grown in containers? That is a really good question. Probably what the citrus representative said was to instead, you know, normally with a big citrus tree, you're going to apply a certain amount of fertilizer in a box. He was saying to instead apply it weekly, either every time you water or each month, but you'd have to check the instructions to see just how to dilute that down. Good question.
Bonnie asked a question about, should you thin the blossoms before it becomes an orange? I would wait until the orange is formed. It's a little bit easier to work with. Plus, I absolutely love the aroma of blooming citrus.
They're blooming right now, at least. And oh my gosh, every time I go out to my car, it smells so good.
I grew up on 10 acres of citrus, so it's just, I miss that so much.
Yeah, and then Narissa said, how long can I leave fruit on the tree? And so this is another one that depends on the variety. She's asking about lemons, and there are lemons. Meyer lemons have a little bit of a different season than some of the other lemons. I wonder, Narissa, when your lemons first started coming ripe, because a couple months is usually okay. I would say once it gets warm, the fruit might start to deteriorate. What do you think, Tim?
And normally when it's been on the tree too long, the skin will begin to look kind of puffy. It's deteriorated and you've left it too long. So once the full color is there, I mean, there's going to be, when they're still immature, there will be a certain amount of greenish tint to a lemon or an orange as far as that goes. And yeah, the difference between the Eureka and a Meyer, Meyer being sweeter and rounder. I would check the normal maturity dates for that particular plant. There are, we have resources for that on the UC system. I couldn't tell you right offhand.
Narissa did say she does have Meyer.
Okay. I prefer Meyer myself, but because they're a little sweeter.
Too. It's a great lemon. Yeah. I know that a lot of times, yeah, like Tim said, depending on where they are in the yard, if the sun's hitting them a lot, they might, deteriorate faster. But, do an experiment, use them as you go and see how long they last. You could leave a few on for experiment and just kind of tell that way.
One thing I would say, if anybody's just now in the market for, at least for oranges in particular, keep in mind that a Valencia orange commercially is more of a juicing orange and will have a lot more seeds than, say, a navel or a Tangelo. And as far as I'm concerned, the navels or the Tangelos to me are sweeter, but I grew up with Valencias, and so I would just go out and bite off a piece of the skin and squeeze it into my mouth and drink the juice. But having 10 acres of them, it was no big deal.
Yeah.
But they are a lot seedier, so that's one of the reasons, besides their thinner skin, that they are primarily a juicing orange commercially.
Delicious. Yeah, I have to say with the Washington navel oranges, it just feels like a total waste to squeeze them, because when you cut them open and you eat that pulp, oh my gosh, it's so delicious. I would hate to think about throwing it out. Well, someone's asking about sumo oranges. Are they still copyrighted, or can you buy the tree commercially? Are you talking about Satsuma oranges? I wonder if she's talking about Satsumas, those are available. Maybe she's talking about another orange that I haven't heard about.
Satsuma is a type.
She's saying sumo. I don't think I've heard of that one.
I don't know that one. Satsuma is a type of mandarin, isn't it?
Oh, she said they're patented. Maybe it'll be a while before they get in the trade, or maybe they're like the Harry and David pears where you'll never get to have them. You have to buy them. Good question. I don't know. There is a really neat research station down south by the university called the Lynn Cove Research Station. And they come up with lots of different new varieties of citrus, and they have tasting programs. They do all sorts of cool stuff. So when I email everybody, I will put that information in the email. But it's called the University of California Lynn Cove Citrus Research Station, if you're watching this and you want to look it up.
And just in case you didn't know, the major citrus growing areas in the United States are Florida, Texas, Arizona, and Central Valley, well, all of California, central and southern.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that disease that we mentioned earlier has really decimated the industry in Texas and in
Florida.
Yeah, the trees are just dying, and they're replacing them, and the juicing industry is hurting. So, yeah. But we don't want to end on bad news. So get out there, check out your local nursery or garden center. There's so many other varieties of things with oranges. There's more than just navel oranges and Valencias. There's Caracaras and blood oranges and all sorts of stuffs, and different mandarins and lemons. So it's a lot of fun.
Kumquats.
Kumquats, those are fun. Those are really fun to just pop in your mouth. Or I would say that should be kids' favorite, like nature's candy. It's like sweet but sour. Maybe you could get them away from those like Sour Patch Kids and stuff like that. Although Debbie says, try Sumos, you won't go back. All right, where are you getting these Sumos? Are they at the grocery store? Sounds like a really neat orange. I'm gonna have to try it. Oh, okay, she's listed Sam's Club and Sprouts, but I would imagine, I guess just look for them at various stores that carry different types of oranges, or ask your local grocer if they carry them. All right, well, we will call it a night. So thanks, everybody. It was great to see you. Oh, Dan was commenting, he loves kumquats, the best kumquats. The best part is that the peel is edible. Yes, that is the best part. Fast food right there. Don't even have to peel it. All right, thanks again, everybody. Have a good rest of your day, and feel free to watch more of our videos on our YouTube channel. We'll see you next time. All right, Tim. People are still hanging around, but mostly dropping off. So, oh, they're all gone. It's just me and you. You did awesome. That was great. I did not know that the rootstock for some oranges is called sour grapes. That was really cool. So you did a lot of really neat research that added a lot. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
This is awesome. Now we will put this up on YouTube and check that off our list. And hopefully other master gardeners will want to do the same talk. So.
Okay.
And it sounds like you and I need to either go to Sprouts or Sam's Club to find the Sumo orange.
Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit of research. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, it sounds like it must be big.
All
right, thanks again, Tim.
All right, Ann. See you Thursday.
That's right. All right, see you then.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.